there's something to this notion of founder energy, that if you built up the company, you have the authority to make big changes or big pivots, as indeed Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk have done at different points in time. A lot of CEOs might be quite competent, but they're brought in to do a job. They have to manage too many constituencies. They have a board, they have employees, they have a senior management team, they have the media, they have whatever else. And in essence, what they're doing is just getting the company through all that and juggling all the balls. That can be fine. Usually, in fact, it is fine. But when big changes need to happen, they just don't have the institutional capital to get that done.
Hello, and welcome to FranklinCovey on Leadership. I'm your host, Will Hodeling, FranklinCovey's head of product. In these conversations, we talk with many of the world's leadership experts on the mistakes, mindsets, and methods that help them become the people they are today. We hope that their hard-earned insights will accelerate you on your journey. Today's guest is Tyler Cowen. Tyler Cowen is the chair of economics at George Mason University. He's a prolific author, having written many best-selling books. He is the author of the Marginal Revolution blog and the host of the podcast Conversations with Tyler. Introducing Tyler Cowen by sharing his title and what he's written and said will inevitably undersell his abilities. Tyler Cowen is one of the world's broadest thinkers, an expert in a seemingly endless array of topics. On his podcast, Conversations with Tyler, he takes guests on an intellectual whirlwind tour of a variety of different topics. And so in today's conversation, we'll try to do the same. We touch on leadership, but also what he would do as CEO of multiple companies, what he would do if he were graduating from college today, his reflections on AI and global politics, and much more. Tyler Cowen, welcome to FranklinCovey on Leadership.
Hello, happy to be talking with you.
Wonderful. Well, I'm a longtime listener and a longtime reader, so very excited to have this conversation today.
Great.
So you are an incredibly broad thinker. I'm incredibly impressed by the number of topics that you are seemingly expert on. Talking about your information diet, you're a self-proclaimed infovore.
Well, I was born as a hyperlexic. That's the formal word for it. What it means in practice is that I can read really fast. So I just read a lot of books. I read a lot online, and I just keep on reading, and my life has been built around that really since I was 2 or 3 years old. So that may sound a little strange, but I would say that's been the source of a competitive advantage for me. I can just absorb material a lot more quickly.
How many books do you read a year, would you say?
I don't know. If I'm not tied up in something, I could easily read 5 a night. So it depends. I don't keep track. A lot.
Your curiosity is clearly key to your success. You're probably one of the most curious people I've ever met or heard. Is that curiosity innate, or is it something that can be trained or developed in someone?
For me, it's innate. I'm not saying other people cannot develop it. I've seen cases of that happening. But if you're born that way, it's super easy, and it's self-sustaining, because the more things you learn, the more you want to learn. So for instance, you go to different countries, you become curious about their religions or their cuisines or their histories, and it just keeps on building, growing. And there you go. There's more to learn about. And now with AI, that's fantastic. So much learning at your fingertips.
How is AI factoring into your personal learning journey?
Well, if you have a question, you go to GPT-5 or you go to Claude, and you just ask, and you get an answer right away. They've been getting better rapidly. But right now, their answers are better than what you would find from most books, including from, say, a university press. So I've been reading a lot more from AIs. They're not perfect yet, but my goodness, you can interrogate them. You can go in greater depth, ask any follow-up question. It's an amazing time to be alive.
Absolutely. So FranklinCovey is a leadership company, and I want to ask a few questions about leadership. I've heard you say in the past that you believe most management books aren't particularly helpful, but there is a lot of deep insight buried in specific books about people who are leaders in other capacities. So what are an example or two of books that are not traditional management books, wouldn't be found on the leadership shelf of the bookstore, but you think teach a lot about management?
Well, I think what's important here is to read a book about someone in sports or music or whatever other field where you already know a lot about that person. So for me, one of those people would be Magnus Carlsen, #1 world chess player. Another person would be Paul McCartney. I know a lot about them, so when I read the stories of how they built up what you might call their empires, it makes sense to me. The pieces fit together. What I find in books about actual individual human beings is you get some version of the truth. It might be edited, but it's more real than management stories where there's all this money on the line. Maybe it's taken from company archives. It's quite neutered or sanitized. Maybe it's a story just about how they made a lot of money, but the personalities are drained from it. So it's a lot more alive when it's a topic you care about.
What do you think leaders, Magnus Carlsen in particular, I know you were a chess prodigy growing up. What can we all take from Magnus Carlsen?
Well, the value of obsession. He's just always thinking about chess, how to improve his chess, how to win. He's just a very smart individual human being. So he has a new venture for a new chess league that he's involved in. He's managed his career remarkably well. He has incredible media skills. He's a great endorser for commercial products. He's a national hero of Norway. So he's a business person also. And he's been A+ at that. And that's another way you can learn is, say, by reading about Magnus Carlsen. But if you don't know about chess, I wouldn't say pick him. Pick someone where you know about what they're doing.
I recently had McKinsey's CEO practice leader on the podcast. Do you think that CEOs are undervalued or overvalued?
Well, they're underpaid. So a great CEO for a company usually is worth much more than what they're paid. And there's even some research papers. Sadly, there are these periodic rare events where a younger CEO dies by accident, a car crash or something. And then you see how much the company's stock goes down. And if you compare the number the stock goes down to how much they're just paid really a fraction of the value they create. Or just anecdotally, you look at someone like Mark Zuckerberg, like there would not be Meta, earlier Facebook, without Mark. Elon Musk, almost by definition, they're underpaid. Without them, there'd be nothing, but they're not paid the whole sum of value either.
Why do you think more CEOs aren't better?
I think there's something to this notion of founder energy, that if you built up the company, you have the authority to make big changes or big pivots, as indeed Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk have done at different points in time. A lot of CEOs might be quite competent, but they're brought in to do a job. They have to manage too many constituencies. They have a board, they have employees, they have a senior management team, they have the media, they have whatever else. And in essence, what they're doing is just getting the company through all that and juggling all the balls. That can be fine. Usually, in fact, it is fine. But when big changes need to happen, they just don't have the institutional capital to get that done.
You have I don't know if you would call it an investment vehicle or group, Emergent Ventures, where you identify incredibly highly promising young people around the world and give them money to pursue their dreams. In that, and I don't know if that you would that's an accurate characterization of Emergent Ventures, but in that you really focus on selection effect, and there's very little training or development of those individuals that you lead. I'm curious, for institutions like Harvard or Y Combinator, how much of the success of their graduates do you think comes from the selection effect versus cohort effect, training effect?
Most of it is selection effect. If it's Harvard or Y Combinator, I think the networking you do when you're there is very important. And also it raises your aspirations. You're taught at Harvard that it's your destiny to rule the world, and that's an exaggeration, but partly it turns out to be true. Same with a small number of other top schools. They don't teach you that much, if that's what you're asking. You learn a few important things, one of them being, well, this is what Harvard is like, which you can only learn at Harvard or Stanford or MIT, respectively. But getting the right people, I think also in business, in music, in sports, it's the key to success. What are you doing to attract them?
If you were to add more training and development to Emergent Ventures, what would you teach?
Well, we teach people as it stands how to stay in touch with each other, how to meet collaborators through the network, how to reach out for help, how to write a cold email, who it is you should be looking to meet, how to raise additional money. People either learn that from me or from the two other people I work with as selectors, or most likely they learn it from each other. So one way to scale things is to build out a network and have people learn from each other.
There's a lot of research on the impact of great management on organizational success. There's also a lot of research on the effectiveness of management training and leadership development broadly. Why do you think it is, given this body of research, that, at least from my perspective, companies systematically underinvest in building great managers?
Well, one reason is simply the manager might leave. If you make the person much better, they may be in line for a better job somewhere else, and then you've spent money and other people capture the value. I think that's the most obvious reason. But I think also investing in longer term organizational capital, it's somewhat intangible. It's hard to be rewarded for that. No one quite knows who deserves the credit for a lot of those investments. Those would be some other reasons.
That makes sense. I want to move from talking about leadership, which is obviously our normal ground, onto some of your research and background. You have done a lot of research over the years on the importance of growth, dynamism, and long-termism. You wrote The Great Stagnation in 2011, Complacent Class, and Stubborn Attachments, and subsequently you've been pushing for a new science of progress. Is all of the progress in AI and biotech and energy, how does that impact and influence your thesis from 10 years or so ago? If you were to rewrite that body of work, what would you change knowing what's happened with AI?
Well, in 2011, I wrote that America has been in a technological stagnation, but I also predicted we would get out of it pretty soon. And in 2013, I published a book called Average is Over, which argued artificial intelligence will be the thing that gets us out. So those predictions, I think, are, to sound immodest, but I think they're looking pretty good. Biomedicine, I did not see as making the advances it did so quickly. That would be further evidence that we're out of the great stagnation, but clearly we are. We have amazing things going on. My guess will be you'll live to age 98 and die of old age. I'm not sure I'm in league for the same treatment from Mother Nature, but there's a chance. And we're going to have all the world's intelligence at our fingertips.
What right now is holding back growth?
Well, if you mean for the United States, we have a lot of regulations that slow things down. We have inefficient supply chains. We have too many permitting requirements. It's too hard to build out our energy supply. That in turn makes it much harder to build out AI compute. And the slowness of building out AI compute holds back just about everything. So that would be a quick off-the-cuff answer.
Absolutely. You also have a body of research about cultural economics and globalization across creative destruction, how globalization is changing the world's cultures, market, and cultural voices. You talk about how globalization tends to enrich culture rather than homogenize it and actually make it more diverse. In the last 5-10 years or so, there's been a criticism of maybe it's algorithmically driven actually homogenation, that no matter where you go in the world, you can find a Brooklyn hipster aesthetic with subway tile backsplash and exposed wood and whatnot. Do you still now believe, with the rise of AI and algorithms and Pinterest and Instagram, that we're still creating, globalization is still creating a more diverse and not a more homogenous global culture?
With AI and also social media, even lone individuals can create things for themselves in the styles they want. It is true, you can go to many, many cities and find that Brooklyn-style hipster cafe, but you can just find many other things as well. So I remember in the 1990s, people predicted some kind of American or Hollywood culture would take over the world. I would say right now Hollywood is quite ailing. And if you go to China or India, those are very strong, largely autonomous cultures. They do borrow ideas from us as we do from them, but it doesn't feel anything like being in the United States. And a vital, growing economy is going to be creative, and it will be creative on its own terms. And I think you see that all over the globe.
One of your other bodies of research more recently has been on talent. You wrote a book, Talent with Daniel Gross, in 2022. You launched Emergent Ventures, as we talked about. You've now more recently launched Fast Grants. What do you value in people that most others miss?
I'm not sure others miss it. What I value most is curiosity and a willingness to be different and to dare to do things, and a sense that the world could be different, the ability to imagine that, and then being agentic enough to take steps to try to bring that about. I mean, you could sit down with anyone and they'd all tell you they value some subset of those things, right? How much do people actually value them? I'm never quite sure, But that's how I describe what I value in others.
The research on interviewing, which is how most people evaluate people for jobs and often for programs or fellowships or whatnot, the research on interviewing is that most people are very poor predictors of performance. They're guided by a lot of their innate biases and whatnot. How do you evaluate something like whether somebody is agentic or not in an interview? Anybody can say that they're agentic, so how do you evaluate that quickly?
I look for mastery of details. Simply hearing the adjectives a person says, I wait for almost nothing. Whether the person smiles or seems attractive or articulate, I wait that for almost nothing. Do they seem weird and obsessive and almost a little, scary isn't the word. I don't mean it in a negative way, but that they radiate this energy where you're like, whoa, I feel your energy, and you're almost a little pushed back by it. I look for those things and just don't think too much. Is this pleasant? Is this fun? Do they speak well? Maybe those matter, but everyone picks up that stuff, right? Look for these other things. And look for, are they self-improving? Not how much do they know now, but how much better did they get over the last 6 or 9 months?
I love that. Yeah, one of our company kind of founding philosophies at my previous startup Strive was to hire for slope over intercept. So absolutely agree with your sentiment there. I now want to move to talk about global politics, which is maybe a topic that we don't cover very often on this podcast, but would be fascinated to hear your perspective. So I asked one of your former interviewees on your podcast, Pier Paolo Barbieri, who's an old friend of mine and one of the smartest people I know. I asked what question he would have for you, and he said, in 1994, Fukuyama said that history was over. Democratic capitalism has won, but now we have a new Cold War with China that clearly wants regional control. We have the great financial crisis, and now the new world of Donald Trump reasserting nationalism. How do you think that the history books will tell the stories of these decades a century from now?
I think the biggest development will be the rise of China and also artificial intelligence. And a third possibility, which I'm not predicting, but it's possible, is simply having another major war of some kind, which I hope does not happen. But with Russia, China, the Middle East, all really in a pretty bad situation, I don't think we can dismiss that. But China and AI, and then I think the biosciences. In part, history has come back because pretty soon we'll have the ability to reshape what human beings are through some form of genetic engineering. What decisions will we make? How will we regulate that? How should we regulate that? They're very tough questions for anyone. It's unlikely we really get them right at first, maybe not ever. And those are momentous philosophic questions of a kind we weren't yet faced with in the 1990s.
Where are all the great leaders? It's a question many of us are asking at a time when visibility has replaced vision and tech-first solutions have driven out people-first leadership. But great leaders aren't hiding somewhere out there. They're already in your organization, just waiting to be unlocked. Bridge the leadership gap when you join us virtually this November 4th through 7th at the FranklinCovey Impact Conference. Hear from top leadership thinkers like Mel Robbins, James Patterson, Patrick Ledden, Stephen M.R. Covey, and more, all for free. Transform your leadership and make a lasting impact. Register now at impact.franklincovey.com. What about this last 10 years would have surprised you the most 10 years ago? And what do you think that tells you about your prediction algorithm?
Well, let's see. 10 years ago was 2015. I've always thought Russia would attack Ukraine again and try to take it. I did think Chinese economic growth would have slowed down more than it has, so China has gone faster than I thought. Artificial intelligence being a big thing hasn't surprised me. That advances in the biosciences, say immunology against cancer or CRISPR or mRNA vaccines, I don't feel I saw any of that at all. That's been a very positive and pleasant surprise.
And what does that tell you about your current predictions for the next 10 years?
Well, I think I got lucky over the last 10 years. So over the last 10 years, I've done pretty well. And what's coming for the next 10 years, the scope of possible outcomes seems so wide. I'm not sure I have predictions at the moment, like China, Taiwan, Russia, Ukraine. How powerful will AI be and how quickly will it develop? I don't have predictions flat out, and that tells you something. I'm really very baffled by the data I'm seeing.
Pierre Paolo's second question was whether you think that the Fed should be replaced by AI, that we have rates set algorithmically rather than individuals setting them.
Well, not yet, but I think 3 years from now, the best way to run the Fed will be to have a smaller staff. Almost all of them should be AI experts, and they will consult with AI, and AI probably should have like 75-80% of the decision making, not authority, final decision will be human, but influence over the decision. There might still be political questions or what you might call mood-based questions where the AI on its own can't quite do it. But for the technical issues, that's whom or what we should ask soon.
The final question from Pierre was about demographic decline, which I know is a topic that you've talked a lot about. What is the best strategy to overcome demographic decline, or are we all destined to become like Japan? And if so, what are the implications of a world with so many fewer children?
Well, that's another area where I don't have good predictions, or really I don't have predictions flat out. I think for the United States, Canada, Australia, there's a pretty simple answer, and that is for a long time we can take in the best people from other places. And that will work. It will not literally work forever, but it really will work for a long time to come. But most countries are not in that position. So Brazil right now has a total fertility rate of about 1.3, which is low. East Asia can be, 1.0. South Korea is below 0.7. That's unbelievable. And those places are less attractive to migrants. I genuinely don't see what they're going to do. I mean, South Korea could literally disappear, not quite within your lifetime, but fairly soon. And I just hope there's some kind of religious revival or other reasons why people suddenly think that having kids is a lot more fun. I'm not predicting that, but it's the only way I see out. I don't think subsidies can be big enough to get people over that hurdle if they don't really want more kids.
In the United States, this is anecdotal, but it feels like there has been a swing towards having kids being high status again.
Absolutely. This is great. All these wealthy families with 4 kids.
Do you anticipate that coming to Southeast Asia, to South Korea, as you were mentioning, to Brazil? Why is that a uniquely American phenomenon?
Well, we're very wealthy at the upper end. But I think also the places that have the toughest fertility problems, the marriage either doesn't happen at all or it comes quite late. There's some disconnect between men and women, which the U.S. has as well, but it seems much stronger in South Korea. So the mere fact that some high-status families might want to have 4 kids, well, maybe there'll be artificial wombs or surrogacy, but they're complicated, they're emotionally costly. But yeah, I think it will spread somewhat. Yes.
I asked another one of our mutual friends, Nathan Lebenz, for his questions and topics that he would love to ask you if given the chance. And he asked, regardless of how likely you think it may be, do you have in mind for yourself a line that the current American administration could cross, which would cause you to shift from being an academic commenter to more vocal opposition to the current administration?
Well, I vocally oppose all bad things that happen that I'm aware of as it stands now. I try to do that using academic knowledge, but I find it more useful just emotionally for my own sanity to do it issue by issue rather than to focus on personalities or presidents or candidates. And I've always been that way. It's not just during the age of Trump. What I see is that people who are both pro-Trump, anti-Trump, as they talk about Trump, I find it makes them stupider. We're less intelligent in talking about other people than we are in staying analytical and talking about issues. So I think I'll stay that way no matter what. At least I hope I stay that way no matter what. But there's plenty to oppose, like the tariffs, right? Or taking 10% of Intel and all these other companies. I'm against those things, and I've said so.
What's a current administration policy that you're supportive of?
The AI policy has been excellent. Build out energy supply, build out compute, try to involve our allies when it comes to AI, be globalist. So far, it's probably the best thing they've done. And it's gone well, too.
I was turned on to your blog probably 10 years or so ago by a very close friend, Jay Gierak, who is a big fan. And I asked him what he would want to ask you. And he said he would want to see what Tyler Cowen as CEO of a million different companies would do. So we're going to now do a part of the episode of Tyler Cowen, CEO of X, not literal X Twitter, but CEO of a number of companies. So
I'd love to be CEO of X, in fact, but I'd get a
why
lot
don't
more
we start
followers.
there? All right, we'll start with that one. If you were CEO of X, what would you do?
Well, I think they need a much tighter rein on people who post nasty things. I didn't like the old Twitter. They were far too willing to cancel people within the legitimate sphere of opinion, but I think it swung too far in the other direction. So that would be the first and main thing I would do. The second thing I would do is tweet a lot more.
What if you were president of Harvard? What would you do differently?
Other than resign? You know, in universities, above all other places, you can say personnel is policy. So I would, over time, work very hard to replace the bad current deans, and there are many of them, with better deans. But it's very hard to change a university. You don't control the cost structure. Faculty are tenured, and at Harvard, those things are not going to change. So I'm back to my first instinct being wanting to resign.
Bad and better are subjective terms. What would define a bad dean and what defines a better dean in that circumstance?
A bad dean doesn't want to build. A bad dean doesn't raise money. A bad dean does not support their best faculty. And a bad dean can be too obsessed with, say, DEI, as has often been the case at Harvard. A good dean speaks up for students, for the best faculty, has a public presence, and spends a lot of time talking to the professors and supporting morale and helping them get their job done.
Wonderful. You're a big basketball fan, as am I. What would you do if you were Adam Silver and you ran the NBA?
Well, I would penalize the Los Angeles Clippers more for that under-the-table deal with Kawhi Leonard. I think the Clippers will get off scot-free. I would undertake, as it seems they're doing, some kind of expansion to Mexico City and partly Europe. I think doing that well is tricky. I don't have figured out how they should do it. I would consider doing something with the Gulf, and I would try to make the regular season shorter and bring in more revenue for those places and use, the extra games that are being pushed away to be some set of like mini tournaments or events in those locations. You want them to be televised live in the US. I get that there's a time zone problem, but I think ultimately a lot of that will prove solvable and can make them a lot more money. That's what I would do as Adam Silver. And I'd restructure the lottery. It's not really effective.
Say more on that.
Well, Dallas Mavericks get the number one pick. Washington Wizards, it seems they never really get a great pick or not often. And I understand the incentive to tank. But still, I would have the worst teams get a better crack at the best players.
Why do you think the Clippers will get off scot-free?
Because I'm not seeing major stories in major news outlets about punishment. If it were a big punishment, you'd hear about it. If it's just swept under the table, there'll be kind of scurry-like whispers, but no big story. And so far, that's what it seems to be. And it's hard to punish a team. Like, in a way, they're your boss, and owners somewhat side with each other, and probably other owners have done things like that. But it is a gross and direct violation of the rules from everything we can see. And at some point, you've got to enforce those rules or they become totally meaningless.
Yeah. I started my career at Google. I'm curious, if you were CEO of Google, if you took over for Sundar, what would you do differently?
Well, Google has gotten its act together on the AI front, and their share price is up a lot. So the things you would have criticized Google for, they're afraid to ship, you can't anymore. So I would reinstall the current leadership if I were CEO of Google. I guess I would make the company somewhat less woke, but again, personnel is policy, and I think I would only have a modest impact in that direction.
What about Disney?
Well, I would put real talented directors in charge of Star Wars. The installments might make less money. In the longer run, it would keep it a healthy and viable franchise. And I would just insist they be really good movies and give people creative freedom, the ability to have unhappy endings, whatever they wanted. And I don't care about the rest of the company. I just want to see Star Wars be great again. Make Star Wars great again, to rephrase from Trump. That's my agenda there. They can have the rest.
Excellent. If you were in charge of the DNC, what would you do for the Democratic Party?
Well, you have the voters you have, so I would like them to run people such as Josh Shapiro, but heading the DNC, I don't think you can influence that much. So electable people, I agree with most of what Matt Yglesias says about the Democratic Party. Wanting to win should be a higher priority, and try to take back a number of Senate seats by running people in what used to be swing states, and sometimes would vote for the Democrats, but they would be Democrats who might be pro-life or pro-gun, and whether or not one agrees with that, to win in those places, those are the sorts of things you have to do. And a lot of those senators have gone away, and bring back that tradition. So I say side with Matt Yglesias.
Okay, so more Munchin-style candidates, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Win. Try to win, not be pure.
That makes sense. Two more. If you were the CEO of McKinsey, rise of AI, a lot of the analysis consulting work is potentially at risk. What would you do if you're the CEO of McKinsey?
Well, Toby Lutka, who runs Shopify, wrote a very good memo saying that everyone hired will be expected to work closely with AI. McKinsey has been slower to the punch there, but they are coming around. And I would restructure it into a company that helps other companies turn their operations over to AI. But they need to train their own people a lot and hire many new people who are developing that skill. And right now, they're not there. But that's their future. I hope they can get there in time.
And final question in this category, and this might be unfair as you might not have enough context, but what would you do if you're the CEO of FranklinCovey or you were on the board of FranklinCovey, your leadership company helping thousands of organizations globally?
Well, most companies have too much bureaucracy. I suspect that's true of your company. I don't know how much up and out you have in your promotion policies, but I'd consider having more of it. I'm making that answer up, to be clear, but that's just my instinct. It's not really based on any factual information.
Okay, sounds great. So this was great. Thank you, Jay Garrick, for the suggestion of the segment. This is very fun. I want to move to Tyler Cowen as wise uncle, and I'm going to ask a few kind of more personal related questions.
Sure.
What life and career advice would you give to a recent college grad?
Learn AI, master AI, be ready for a lot of change, build out your network. It will really matter which other humans can vouch for you. It's always mattered a great deal, but it's going to be much, much more important yet.
What about for somebody who is about to get married? What advice would you give on relationships? I know you don't speak about on your own relationship very often, so I'm curious, in the general sense, what advice would you give on relationships?
Well, it will depend on context, but usually my advice would be actually to get married. The ratio of engagements to marriages is pretty high, and if someone's about to get married, especially for men, marriage is good for you, and view it positively. And I meet too many people, especially successful people, who wait too long in life to get married. And then they'll regret, oh, we can't have more children or some other thing. And maybe it's phrasing it wrong to say there's too much choice out there in dating markets, but something like that is going on. And I don't feel that it's gotten healthier.
What about in order to be a great husband? So not just get married, but then actually in order to be in a successful marriage.
Don't insist on being right all the time. Do the small things for your wife that she values a great deal. It could just be opening the door for her. And make sure in advance that you and your wife-to-be have broadly similar attitudes toward children, family, in-laws, whatever, because those things are hard to fix if you don't.
Speaking of children, what advice would you give to a new parent about how to be a great father?
A new parent? Well, don't screw the kid up is the main thing. But love the kid, give it opportunities. Don't drive yourself crazy with stress. It won't make you a better parent. And just you be a good person. And what they will learn from you is not what you tell them, but how they observe you treating your spouse. And take that very seriously.
You often speak about one of the most valuable things you can do for another person is to raise the level of ambition. Do you believe that with kids as well? Do you think it's important for a parent to raise the level of ambition of their kids? And how can that, you can imagine a world in which that backfires.
Oh, it's a great thing to do for your kids. And I think the best thing you can do is introduce them to other people. So don't think you're their main source of influence. Don't try to exert total control. But to the extent you have successful friends, make sure your kids meet them. talk with them, if only for 5 or 10 minutes. And those people will have sorts of influence that maybe you no longer can, especially if your kid's a teenager. What works at age 7 does not work at age 13. So you have to enlist outside support. And there's a good chance your kid will fall in love with the career profile of one of your successful friends.
This final one is a question for me. This is about my 10th or so podcast episode. I'm a relatively new podcast host. You've hosted countless episodes. What advice do you have for a relatively new podcast host?
Well, keep on doing it. So I've done of my own, I think we're approaching 300 episodes, and I've probably done another 300 for other people. And I still will accept invitations from people I don't know to do a podcast with them just for practice. I can't accept all those invitations, but I accept some. And I always feel I need to practice more, whether as host, as guest. Is it always a different thing? No. And just keep on doing it and enjoy it. If you're at the point where you don't enjoy it anymore, reevaluate. Unless you're Joe Rogan, it's probably not your best way of earning money directly. So make it work for you.
How has your performance as a podcast host and guest changed over time, given the volume you've done?
Well, I think it's not for me to judge. The podcast has become much more popular, which is good. So it's achieving some kind of better. I don't know if that means it's objectively better. Maybe it means it's worse. I'm more efficient at doing the prep. I enjoy the prep more than the podcast, and I want to keep on going. So if I want to keep on going, for me, it's a big success.
Lovely. Our final section is around your hobbies. I think one of the things that I've always enjoyed about reading you and listening to your podcast is that while you are very academic and cover a lot of topics, you also seem to have a ton of fun in the world on a lot of personal hobbies. One is music. Today, as we're recording this podcast, D'Angelo unfortunately passed away. I saw you share that he's one of the greats. Who are one of the other modern greats who you love listening to?
Well, Lana Del Rey is pretty incredible. This group, Sun, sort of a dark metal group. Beyonce is pretty incredible. Not anymore, but not too long ago, Kanye West was amazing. Those would be some, a bit earlier, but Wilco, Jeff Tweedy. Jeff just has a new triple album out that's pretty good. Those would be some examples.
It's very rare when you ask somebody for their favorite artist and they say a metal band and Beyonce back to back. What are you looking for when you're listening to music?
Something I haven't heard before that grabs me. Originality. I think popular music peaked in originality in the 60s and early 70s, but there's still a lot of people going who are doing new things. The 90s, you have electronica, you have developments of rap. Some of that has petered out a bit. It's now this world where there's just so many new genres, but a lot of them seem a bit trivial. So I think we're maybe in a 10-year lull somewhat. I'm not pessimistic overall. St. Vincent would be another good one. This is a lot of good artists right now. I'm not sure what we're seeing as a movement that is like both truly original and will last. There's just a lot of people making great music.
You're also a prolific traveler. What's an underrated country that you think more people should spend more time visiting? And maybe within that country, a specific city or area that you would target first?
Well, except maybe for North Korea. They're all underrated. I've been to Mexico the most, and not just Cancun or Mexico City. I think I've been 32 times to Mexico. I love going to India. A country that oddly isn't visited much by Americans is Sri Lanka, which is also pretty clean and quite safe. And it's exotic, and there's great food, and it's very affordable. But I think you can go almost anywhere and just make a great trip out of it. Other than, again, North Korea, maybe places where you can't go, some places at war in Central Africa. There's very few exceptions to that. It's like what you bring with you that matters, and that will make the place great. The place will make you being there great.
And final question in this topic, who is an underrated or who is your favorite NBA player?
Well, Stephen Curry, by far, because he, like Magnus Carlsen, or Paul McCartney, always been obsessed with working on his game. As you may know, he was drafted number 7, which is quite good, of course, but it didn't look like he had any chance of becoming one of the 15 greatest NBA players of all time, and he's achieved that. He's the greatest shooter of all time. he's maybe the most fun to watch. It seems he always enjoys playing. He seems really remarkably intelligent and articulate. So to me, he's an absolute marvel.
Absolutely. I'm a big Warriors fan, lifelong Warriors fan, so I agree with you entirely on that one. We end every interview with the same question. FranklinCovey is a leadership company, so I'm curious, who is a leader who has had a large influence on you, and what did you learn from them?
Well, Steph Curry. I mean, while we're on the topic, never stop practicing. He's age 37, which for the NBA used to be ancient. He, LeBron, and some other people, they're proving it's not ancient. People were saying preseason, Steph is like at an all-time shooting peak. We'll see if that's true, but he's not far from it. That's pretty clear. He chooses his spots more. He doesn't move around as much on defense. But to be one of the most potent weapons in the game and still the best shooter at age 37, you just need to take seriously that that is possible and ask yourself, like, what's my version of that? And Steph is a leader for his team. He's not a whiner. He's not a complainer. He truly wants to build up the team. When Kevin Durant came, he was very willing to take fewer shots, whatever it took to win. Just a tremendous role model for leaders of all kinds.
Wonderful. Well, as I said, I'm a big Steph fan, so that's a great one to end on. I've been looking forward to this podcast, knowing that we would break the record for number of topics touched in less than 40 minutes. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Really appreciate your time and all of your incredible insights.
Thank you, Will. It's been my pleasure.
Lovely. And to all of our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Please subscribe to FranklinCovey on Leadership wherever you listen to podcasts, and hope you'll join us next week for another episode.